How did you get to New York City?
Oh my God. I wanted to live here forever. The first time I encountered it, I was here auditioning for Manhattan School of Music for undergrad. I must have been 16 years old. This is long before GPS and things. And my dad and I got lost in Harlem. We saw what I thought was looking like a sweet old lady. And I was like, ma'am, could you help me find Manhattan School of Music? And she's like, it's right fucking there. And my dad was horrified. And I was like, wait, people can talk like this? I'd grown up in Minnesota and Virginia.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, that's when I knew I wanted to move. I was being verbally assaulted at age 16. I didn't get here until I was 27 though.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I got into some schools for music for grad school too, but I couldn't make the numbers work. So I ended up doing grad school at New England Conservatory of Music. And I didn't move to New York until I was, like I said, 27, and I had a job landed. I wasn't one of those people who's like Annie who gets off the bus and is like, NYC. I'm like, no, I need a job. I need a job before I go to New York City. I'm not just going to hope for the best.
Yeah. So when you couldn't make the numbers work, like just financially, it was too insane.
Yeah. My family, we grew up with some economic hardship. I went to undergrad and grad school, had some debt. I was an opera singer for 9 years, had surgery on my voice when I was 26.
Whoa.
And then when I had decided to change, I got a job as a booking agent in New York. And that's when I was like, oh, this is my time now to come to New York. And I lived in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and had that typical lovely New York first year of bed bugs twice, a tornado, assaulted on the subway, attacked by a dog.
Oh my God.
All of it in 8 months. Yeah. I don't believe in signs, but, I was like,
Bit of a test.
Exactly. But, now I've been here 18 years.
So where did you go to college? Where'd you go undergrad?
Grad school, New England Conservatory for music. And then for undergrad, Lawrence University in Wisconsin, also for music. Voice was the major. I joke in my set, it's like about as useful as majoring in air. It's really just, has so many options. So that was it. I was just obsessed with opera.
Talk to me about that. Like, were you into that from the time you were like very young? How did you get into it? Okay.
No, I stumbled into it. I'd seen like a video or something. I thought it was funny, but let's see, what was it? Oh yeah. So my sister was a violinist. Then when it was my turn to pick an instrument, I also wanted to do something. My mom's like, do voice, it's cheap. Little did she know. The 6 years of college later. No. So then I started taking voice lessons around the time voice started changing. That's really the most logical time for guys to do it. I had a nice voice teacher. She's like, Jonah, I'm going to audition for an opera when the company comes to town. Why don't you just sit and observe? And you can see what that experience is like. And they were very Midwestern and nice. They're like, let's let the child come up here. I guess I was 16. Have him sing a song. We'll give him some feedback. And then they're like, actually, we have a little role in this French opera we're doing by Ravel, L'Enfant les Sortilèges. We think he'd be fine. He seems mature enough to be, on a stage with a bunch of people. So I went away for a summer and I did it. And then I fell in love with it. So I never had a stigma about opera. I've always thought it was just music theater in another language. And then it suited my voice. I thought it was fun to speak or sing in languages that you didn't really understand. And that was the journey.
Did you always have a talent for it? Was it pretty clear pretty quickly that you could do this well?
I think like anything in artistic, there's natural ability, and then you decide if you want to do the craft of it.
Yeah.
So I had a voice that was high. You can hear it now. I was a bass, obviously. No, I had a high voice. It had some things that could do naturally. It could move fast, etc. But then, the craft of it. And I think that's true for comedy, which I know we'll get to later, but I do believe people are either naturally funny or they're not. I don't think you can teach someone to be funny, but then the craft of it is, what's funny in real life is not necessarily funny on stage. So the craft comes later. But yeah, I was good at music naturally.
You got surgery.
Yes.
You said when you were 26?
When I was 26.
What happened?
So prior to that, I was starting to have trouble in a part of my range, which is called the passaggio. It connects the middle and the top. And I'd never had problems there before. I hadn't switched teachers. I hadn't switched coaches. So I didn't know what was happening. Had some ENTs look at it, and it was like having varicose veins on the cords. It wasn't nodes or anything that you normally hear about with like pop singers. Although I will say my surgeon team was the one who did Adele's surgery before Adele. So yes, exactly. That knife. I'm sure, actually, I hope it wasn't the same knife. That wouldn't be very sanitary. But Yeah, so I had it, and then I couldn't speak for a month, which, as you can probably tell, was difficult for me. And then sang a little bit after, but I didn't have the stamina. So I was like in some opera choruses, and I'd lose my voice after an hour. Most operas are like around 3 hours or more. So I was like, all right, I have to do something else. So I trained to be a sommelier for a second. I went to California and did some wine training through the Court of Master Sommeliers. Loved it, but those weren't my people. Like, they could stay up late and do drugs. Restaurant people. Restaurant people are like, it's like a rap video every night, and I'm like, oh, can I be first cut?
Get me out of here.
Yeah, so that life wasn't for me. So I just started applying to stuff, and then I got a booking agent job, grant writer job, and then fundraising 20 years now later.
Yeah. I know you're at Juilliard.
Yes.
How long did that take to move to that school?
Let's see. I've only been there for 11 months. The functionality though of my job has always been the same since fundraising. It's I like it that I happen to know a lot of the faculty at Juilliard from my previous life and stuff, so it feels very homey. Yeah. But, I was the head of the shop at the new school, which has Parsons in it. I was the head of the shop at the Jewish Museum. My mom's a Russian Jew, so there was some connectivity there. But the functionality has stayed the same, and it's one of those jobs that people think sound awful, but it's a lot of fun, No.
I'd love to hear about the decision to finally move to New York. It sounds like you had an interest for a decade before you actually pulled the trigger.
Yeah,
what
but I didn't have the guts to move here with no job. Like, I had lots of artist friends.
You're not insane, you mean?
No, not insane. Or I wasn't just like, I'll temp or something, Like, I actually, when I did first move to New York, I did one of those temp agency tests and I failed. Those Excel things. Yeah. Like I said, my degrees are in singing. So I'm like, wait. I'm sure I can figure this out. That's not exactly what they're looking for, at the temp agency. I'll figure it out. So I, but grant writing, this is before AI too. It's like, I've always been a fast writer too. I'm not a brilliant writer, but I can crank out volume fast, which has been very helpful with stand-up as well. So that was it. I hated grant writing. I felt like it was like doing my taxes over and over again. But then I was introduced to individual fundraising and all that stuff. But no, I needed a secure job when I moved to New York. And when I say secure job, I mean a whopping $32,000 a year.
A salary.
A salary, sure. Yeah. So I'm using air. You can't see on a podcast. I know I'm using air quotes on a podcast.
Slave labor.
But yeah, exactly. But I'm like, all right, I will figure it out. That's enough to get me to New York back in 2007 or 2008, whenever it was. Yeah. And then I'll do grant writing on the side, and I'll figure it out, No.
Were you always told you were funny? You just said, you're either funny or you're not. Yeah, was that always a part of your personality?
I always knew I could get a laugh.
Yeah.
And I liked the way that made me feel, even as early as kindergarten. I was a roaster. No, just kidding. Well, I sort of was. I mean, sadly, the first big laugh I can remember is like, oh, it was so bad. Like, we had to go up to the chalkboard and spell something, and my friend Camille got something wrong, and I said, well, that's embarrassing for her. And everyone started like laughing, and I loved that feeling. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm very mean to Camille Erickson. She also asked me if I was black. That's a different story. So in Minnesota, I was the closest thing. So I knew I could make people laugh. I knew it could be, certainly for fundraising, I knew it could be very helpful because talking about money and class and race and all the things that come up when you talk about money is uncomfortable. Yeah. Particularly for Americans. And so I know humor is disarming. Yeah, and when I think about the shows that I was in, usually my voice type was sort of the boring character, just sort of stand and sing and sing pretty melodies. Yeah. The roles that were the most fun were the ones that were comic for me. If I was the sort of second fiddle, or in Marriage of Figaro, there's a character, Don Basilio, he's the gossip. And he gets everybody in trouble. I loved those roles. Even though it wasn't the most stage time, it didn't matter because you can steal the show. And I'm like, this comes very easily to me. It was very hard to just stand still and sing pretty. Yeah. Like, those roles didn't come naturally to me.
So when did you consider making this a part of your life, really going after it, starting to do actual comedy yourself?
I've only been doing it for about a year and a half. And I've been very fortunate to have a lot of momentum. I think that the reason why I did it was, I was working with an executive coach. We were doing mapping out for the year for my other career. But Actually, let me back up. So back in 2021, my husband and I were on a reality TV show called Baking It with Maya Rudolph and Andy Samberg. And then it was a baking competition. If you can imagine SNL plus Great British Bake Off. It's on Peacock season 1. I'm contractually obligated to say that. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, during the interview portions of it, I remember the producers were like, "Are you a comedian?" And I was like, "No, that's funny though." And then it had been so long since I had been artistically sparked.
Yes.
So I had been the singer. It didn't work out. I was a careerist, so I'm like going to pour everything into my fundraising career. Obviously, something was missing. Starting to get a lot more public speaking gigs. That was fun. And then to be on this TV show that felt very natural to me, not just because of the baking, but like the riffing, the improv with Maya and Andy. Amy Poehler was the producer. It didn't scare me. And then once we shot it, I was like, oh, these are my people. And I don't mean the stars. I mean like hair, makeup, production, props.
Yeah.
And ever since that show, I was like, oh God, something's missing. I want to do something. I don't know what it is. And so I came back one January from winter break. I called the clubs, just different clubs, and said, hey, if you ever teach classes, could you put me on the list? And then a guy called me an hour later and was like, hey, you should take a class with Kevin Dombrowski. He's starting next week, his next cycle. I did a showcase on February, I guess, 2024. He's like, Jonah, you've got something here. I'm going to tell you what they told me at the New Talent at Caroline's when that still existed.
Yeah.
Keep working on it. And then I just started getting into, I had one tape. I sent it to, because I'm Asian, I'm super efficient. I sent it to like something over 136 places, cold called.
Damn.
Obviously I had a performance career, so I don't really get stage fright. And I think that's half the battle of stand-up, of course, stage time. So that was not something that held me back. And then you know how it is. One gig gets another gig. And I just started doing festivals and festivals and festivals. And this year, 3 months ago, I got signed on by a manager. 2 months ago, I got an agent. And now it's just, let's see what happens.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Had you been a fan of stand-up before you tried it yourself?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was. I just didn't see myself as an ideal candidate. I figured, well, my material's not my life, which is usually the material for most people. Not super relatable, but I liked writing, and I didn't find it difficult to write my first 5-minute set. It was the greatest compliment ever when we did it first time in class. He's like, when did you write this? And it's like, when you assigned it, I guess, like a week ago. He's like, let's craft it. And he's been a good teacher, and much like voice and having different voice coaches, now that I've had a bunch of teachers, I go to them with different questions as I'm shaping new material. I love going to Gina Brion for delivery. I love her delivery style. I like going to Rick Crom, especially with if I'm having trouble with a joke, he's like a scalpel. We can spend 45 minutes on one premise. I like going to Kevin to watch my tapes with me or look at my crowd work because he's so good. He hosts at The Cellar and he is the master of it. So I'm not super comfortable with it. So I have him look at my tapes. And so that's sort of how I approach getting better. I don't have a ton of time to do the open mics. I also don't find open mics helpful. I actually can find them you start gaslighting yourself into thinking you're not funny because here, we were talking about it earlier, New York's a different sport. The open mics here are not really shows, right? They're a bunch of comics testing out material. I find I get a lot more when I test something with Rick Crom. To me, that's as good as testing out something to a 10,000 ears because he has heard generations of comics. Veronica Mosey too. She's one I go to if I'm like, is this too dark? She never says no though, so I'm always like, I had to counter. I was getting ready for a show in Amsterdam, and I don't think of my humor as particularly Dutch. So I was like, is this going to work there? And she's like, go for it. And then, it was like an Anne Frank joke. And then she's like, do it. And I'm like, I want to counterbalance your opinion with someone else. Others were like, is it worth it? And then only to find that the Dutch their humor is even darker, I think, than New Yorkers. New York humor is not a great baseline. Another reason why I like doing stuff outside of New York as a real test,
I mean, you're taking a real scientific approach to this, it sounds like, where you're stress testing this with as many really smart and experienced joke masters as you can find.
Yeah, and I force myself the painful exercise of watching the tape.
Yeah.
Every mic I do, I have a spreadsheet and I write down, I rank, and this is what I did as a singer too, though. I rank how my nerves were on a scale of 1 to 5. I rank how I felt the performance went, make notes, and then a couple days later, after the halo has worn off, then I watch the tape, because how I felt it went and how it really went are rarely the same thing in both directions. I can think that it was a horrible set, and usually I do. Usually I'm very disappointed, and that's true when I was singing too. When I was singing, they were like, don't ever listen to your recordings like the night you did it. Wait a few days, have the discipline to wait. And you'll find, oh my gosh, it really wasn't bad. Or you can be like, or you can be a little delusional, like most comedians, and be like, I crushed. And then you watch it and you're like, well, maybe the sound dropped because I really recall more laughter. So like I just feel like there was more laughter when there wasn't. So that was ingrained in you as a singer, though. You had to watch yourself all the time because your body does things involuntarily when you're nervous. You got to get that under control.
Do you get the sense that that's a competitive advantage you have? I don't hear a whole lot of comedians going through that rigorous of a feedback cycle as you just described.
I think, just performing arts training, I think if a dancer were to go into comedy, they'd probably have a similar, type of process. I think I'm also just like, for some reason, I'm like, generically ambitious. So when I started doing shows, I didn't have an end goal.
Yeah.
It does feel like something's happening though, in a good way, being picked up by management and things like that. So now the stakes are feeling a little bit higher, but I still don't know. Again, this is less than a year and a half into it, so I don't know what it means. I'm 45. I'm not foolish enough to think that like I would have the stamina or desire to tour all the time. If I could construct a perfect pie chart, it would be some stand-up, some writing, some producing. I just helped produce some movie with J.K. Simmons that's going to festivals this fall. Commercials, corporate. That would be the totality of the pie. I can't envision myself like doing stand-up all the time. Not that anyone's asking. I keep telling Netflix, not another special. I just pumped one out. How prolific do you think I am? No, I mean, we'll cross that bridge when it happens, but that's not the goal. Yeah. And actually, for the first time in my life, it's lovely not to have a specific goal. It's very freeing.
You talked about some of the traveling you've already done. You just mentioned Amsterdam.
Yeah.
How did these opportunities come about for you?
That was a cold call, and I actually had missed, but I'm in sales, so I know how to pitch. And I wrote them, and I said, I actually had missed the deadline for that festival. I said, if anything opens up, and then they wrote back, and there's like, can you do 20 minutes? And I was like, of what? I was like, by the time that festival rolls around, I sure can. So I just worked my butt off and got from 5 minutes to 20 minutes and then 20 minutes to 30 minutes. And I still don't think I can do a lot more than 30 minutes. But so then once you get one, then another one hears about you, or people loathe the competitions. I like them because they tend to have industry. That's how I got my agent. There was a competition that Anthony Jeselnik did in LA called the US Comedy Competition. You get 2 minutes and 59 seconds.
Wow.
That's it.
Yeah.
But it was enough to pique the interest of a couple people. I did something in Denver once and again, I'm in a really fortunate position where I can work remotely. People at my work are cool with it. I'm older. I'm further along in my career, so I can lose money on the venture. This is not something I could have done, of course, in my 20s.
I'd love to hear about how that works, where you get representation, you get an agent, you get somebody who. How did that happen? Someone saw you and approached you?
Yeah. And I knew a little bit about the world, again, because I had been a booking agent. So I sort of knew the contours of like, what's the difference between a manager and an agent? And I'm sure the people listening, mom, know the difference. But hi, my one listener. No, but like a manager, of course, is like your overall manager of your career and advice and all these things. And, they take 20%. Agent, their role is to get you a job. And the agent, I should be specific, the agent I have, Adam Lieblein at Eris, his job, he focuses on getting me commercial auditions specifically for like, usually they're looking for some comedic talent. Lucia Chang at Sidecar, my manager, she's really responsible for the whole totality of the career and momentum. But let's see. So like I said, Adam saw me at a competition.
Yeah.
And then in LA. So those 2 minutes and 59 seconds, very much worth the flight.
Yeah.
And what was nice about that competition too was like America's Got Talent was there. There was another manager there. There was another person who runs a festival. So it's a very efficient in 2 minutes and 59 seconds. 6 industry folks can decide whether or not there's some interest. And the management piece, this is where it was helpful that I was in the industry. Somebody mentioned to Lucia, go see him. She saw me and she came to multiple shows. And this is how I knew I was really going to like working with her. You know, she came to a couple sets. Then we had a 4-hour meeting. Then we had another meeting. And then she really got to know my point of view, what I was trying to accomplish with the kinds of sets that I'm doing. And then we did a 3-month trial. And now we're into, you know, full representation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said earlier when you were working with an executive coach there, it seemed like there was some itch that you needed to scratch artistically that you were interested in. Has this satiated that for you?
I think this is what it was supposed to be, because after the baking show, I was getting all these weird thing offers. Like I could judge a gingerbread contest. Okay, great. And I was really good at making it funny and giving the museums or wherever the places were sound bites, or speak on a panel that was somewhat related. You know, a lot of the work I do, I talk about the lived experience of fundraisers of color. So I was getting booked to do, which is hilarious. No, ripe for comedy. But I find public speaking really easy. But I was like, there's something not connecting what I do for a living and what's sort of like adjacent to it. And maybe it's this comedy thing, because in my longer sets, I do talk about some of the same things I talk about on the public speaking, obviously in a comedic way, but I talk about code switching. I talk about the toll of racism on people. I talk about how AI facial recognition is really racist. How I talk about how the faucets and hand dryers in airport bathrooms are really racist because those were beta tested on white skin, and that's why they don't work as well for people like me. So, I mean, all those things I talk about, I just have a different lens on it when I do it in stand-up versus when I'm doing it at a big conference in, you know, Washington, D.C. or something.
Now that you're doing this more frequently, do you feel like you had a lifetime of commentary, observations, cultural criticism that is now coming out?
Yeah, I don't understand writer's block. And again, because I'm not 27, right? And I'm not, you know, I joke about writing the white straight man 20 set. Like, let's see, therapy, the apps, what else? No, I could totally do it. Roommates. You know, but and I don't mean to knock that, because that is what you know at that age, right? It's your lived experience. As a 45-year-old who is gay, Asian, Jewish, married for 10 years, has lived in California, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Virginia, New York, you know, has toured, etc. Like and has come into a much more, has the vocabulary now to talk about things like DEI in a way that may be more digestible. I actually feel more ready now. I literally have a bag of ideas at home of stuff that I haven't gotten to yet. My younger brother, who passed away during COVID, he had cerebral palsy. And there's a whole set. I have just scratched the surface about talking about people being a sibling to someone with a disability. Again, hilarious. No, but you know, but they say write true first and then funny will come later. I'm still waiting for the funny on that part, to be honest. I was like, I've written the sad stuff, but there was a whole bit I wanted to do around the Paralympics about, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it's a matter of time. And also I don't want to present anything that's not polished at a festival. So that's where not doing open mics does hurt me, because I don't feel comfortable doing new material until I really worked it a bit with teachers at least twice, and at maybe indie shows where there's no industry present. That's where I work out stuff. But if I'm doing a show, I'll be at Don't Tell Mama, for example, this weekend. That's not a place where I feel it's appropriate for me to do new material. Those people have paid money.
Yeah.
They should expect to see me at my best.
Yeah. I don't know how much you've thought about where you want this to go. I mean, I know you still are working in at Juilliard.
Yeah.
Is your goal eventually, do you kind of in your gut feel like this is propelling you forward where this could become your full-time thing?
Yeah, I think, so Juilliard's the third shop I've run, the development shop. So before that, it was the New School, which is Parsons. Before that, it was the Jewish Museum. I've been doing it for a long time, and it's been my anchor. It's been a godsend for my finances, all that kind of stuff. I don't have a lot left to prove, though, for it. And so, I would like chapter 1, if we want to be really cute about it. Chapter 1 was the singing. Chapter 2 was the fundraising in terms of career.
Yeah.
And then chapter 3, I would love for it to be a mix of things. Again, I don't have the ego to think that I could do stand up full time. Also, let's just be honest, the finances of it, right? In comedy, there's not that many ways to make money. Corporate, cruises, colleges, the 3 C's, I call them. I'm just kidding. I just made that up. I've always said the 3 C's, corporate, college, and cruises. But corporate, I just had to turn down a gig for a pharma company. Look, let's be honest. It was going to be a great check. Did it look like the most fun I was ever going to have?
Yeah.
Not based on the briefing they sent me.
Sounds like a blast.
Yeah, exactly. Ozempic, I barely know her. No, but but that's good money. Cruises, I don't frankly think my material is going to fly. Not because I swear and like super dirty or anything like that. It's just that usually what I've been told by people who book the cruises is like, we're looking for something right down the middle. And mine is staunchly liberal. It talks a lot about race. It talks a lot about not buffet humor. Like I can't imagine getting Oreo cake and then sitting down and enjoying my set about racial disparities.
Yeah.
I've been told by some agents who book for colleges that it's probably not going to work, even though I have performed at colleges. It's fine, but it's fraught. They're 17, they're 18. They've probably never been to a comedy show before. It's like the mechanics of it, how it works. And it just, again, you have to be pretty careful. So I don't see myself in those environments.
You've alluded to this a little bit, but I don't know how deeply you've thought about this, but what are the advantages in your mind of starting this in your 40s? Because that's not the rule, that's the exception.
Yes.
But as you've just alluded to, there are some advantages. You've lived a life. You have experiences. You have plenty to say, it sounds like. What are the advantages in your mind?
The stakes feel lower.
Okay. Yeah.
When I'm at competitions in particular, I see excellent comedians in their 20s and 30s really nervous. And part of that might just be a limited stage experience or learning to manage the nerves. But I feel like they feel there's more riding on it.
Yeah.
Because they know in their gut. And part of it is them knowing. They're like, I want us to tour full time. I was in a van driving from Denver to Fort Collins. I did the Rise Comedy Festival, which is incredible. I highly recommend it. They're so organized. And if you're from out of town, they go out of their way to try to get you gigs outside of Denver.
Cool.
So they were taking a bunch of us to Fort Collins. Great show. We were coming back. And I said to the guys in the van, it's like, hey, just pulse check. If you could do this full time, would you? And everyone except me said yes. And I said, in terms of the touring, and I said, why is that? And someone said, the travel. And I was like to Fort Collins? I'm sorry, I've been to Paris, like a couple times. But, but me at 23 would have been titillated by Fort Collins. For me, it was like, oh yeah, I guess that is close to Denver.
Yeah.
It's like, so I think just a lived experience of it. So I don't feel like the stakes do feel like, because I obviously don't want to let down my manager and agent. So that feels a little different. I want to do a good job for them because they're rooting for me. So those stakes feel a little bit higher, but I guess I just don't have the nerves of like a 20 or 30 something.
And ego wise, financially wise, this is not going to make or break you. Right. It does seem
if I
like
don't get that $20 bar show, which I'm very grateful for, by the way, if the bar that did that for me that one time.
You're kind of playing with house money, it sounds like.
Well, yeah. The goal, I've, of course, again, I'm Asian, so I've mapped out a 3-year economic cash flow chart. Don't laugh. I showed it to my manager. She's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You just started.
Old habits die hard.
I know, but I was like, the goal, but I knew this also from booking artists for touring. Like for touring, a good goal is to break even.
Wow.
Right? Because touring is so expensive, especially if like big dance companies, which is what I was booking. Because when you take into account, the travel and the hotel and the off time and the food and all that stuff, breaking even would be a dream. I've got friends who are professionals and other big ensembles, and, they know they will lose money on the tour, and that's okay because the goal is, PR or whatever, or footprint in Germany or something like that. So, yeah, so losing money for me at this enterprise right now is fine. Obviously, it isn't going to be fine forever if I want to eventually go into a chapter 3 with this.
I don't know if you thought a lot about this as well, but for people that are in New York just starting out their comedy career, what are the great venues? Everyone knows the Comedy Cellar. People know Gotham, which we've talked about. What are the other places that you have really enjoyed in the city that you would recommend people check out or try to perform at as a beginner?
Oh, I mean, I think in terms of feeling supported, Broadway comedy goes out of its way to make room for newbies. Greenwich Village Comedy Club, and they're connected. I think they book together. And if you're a queer comic, you can often feel very left out. And Greenwich does that through the New York Queer Comedy Festival, through Drew Tessier. He makes tons of space for new queer comics. And that's vital because, you don't know if it works until you have an audience. Yeah. And that's the hardest thing in New York. I have friends who do comedy in other cities like Portland, and they get like 15-minute, 20-minute chunks of stage time all the time. Whether or not that makes them sharp at it is another thing, but that is so valuable, and you just don't get that in New York. So my recommendation would be, since obviously I've been doing this forever, 18 months, not even 18 months, but what has been most helpful to get into the DNA of it all, to get into the system of New York, is take a class, whether it's Cellar, Laughing Buddha, New York Comedy, because then you meet people who produce the indie shows, and then you start doing the indie shows, and then again, one gig gets you another gig, and then it just starts to roll. In terms of career stuff, though, what I would say is you do, and this is what Kevin told us at our very first class, on my first comedy class ever, you have to get out of the city. You must perform out of the city to see if the material works, to get it perspective, to be seen. Because the New York Comedy Festival, should you be lucky enough to get in, it has the big ones, right? It's got the Ali Wongs and the Ronnie Changs, and I'm just naming Asian comics. Exactly. There's white comics too. There's like one or two white comics. The Mark Marons, the Natasha Leggeros, and so the people you would want to be seen by aren't going to see you there. Should you be? But if you're in Denver, and there's scouts, you have a greater chance of being seen. That's where the scout for America's Got Talent saw me for the first time. And then she saw me again in LA. I ultimately didn't book it, but I wouldn't have been seen by her in New York. It's too big. There's an estimated over 10,000 comics in New York City. Crazy. Yeah. But if I'm doing a little thing in Denver that's been vetted, and not a little thing, like something that's been vetted, I just have a greater chance of being seen, or in, where else would I get to headline? But like I was in Traverse City, Michigan, when I got to headline for Natasha Leggero. I couldn't do that for her in New York. Yeah. But in Traverse City, Michigan, I could.
I know this isn't full time for you yet, but this is still a lot of time and energy to be focusing on this. Is the gratification primarily in knowing you have something to say? Is it the joy of just performing? How do you think about why you are so driven to do this, even though it's not 100% of your time and energy? Yeah. It's a lot. It's starting to, like, at first it was like, oh, let's just see what happens. Now it really does feel like a job. I mean, I literally have a manager, right? And an agent, and they expect things from me and I expect things from them. So that has definitely changed in the last 3 months. I don't think I'm a stage animal. I think I was taught, like, I feel very comfortable on stage, but I feel like that was taught. So actually I do love making people laugh in any kind of venue. And I do love the ability to not have to code switch. So one of the presentations I do in my day job is a lot about the experience of fundraisers of color and how money, race, and classism in the United States makes it difficult if you're not in the norm, and the sort of totality of whiteness, all that kind of stuff. Again, comedy gold. But
In stand-up, I don't have to code switch. And it just dawned on me, honestly, in the last few months. It's like, it's the one time in my life I get to go on stage. It's me at a 10, sure, but it's just me. And that's whether I'm in Williamsburg, Virginia, or Iowa City, or Amsterdam, or LA, or Traverse City. It's the same person. It's the same way to present. And I've never had that experience before in anything else I've ever done.
You mentioned earlier you're a queer comic.
Yes.
And
what? Don't tell mom. I haven't come out yet. Cut. Edit this out. As he's wearing like the New York Queer Comedy Festival t-shirt. I'm doing it ironically.
What's it like? I mean, as somebody who I'm not in that world, is it a hyper masculine environment? Like, what's it been like?
You really haven't been, have you? No, it's like opposite. No, I think what is nice. Well, in a I don't know what to call it, mainstream show, whatever. There's usually like one, right? And you're hyper aware of that. Just like in the real world. It's funny, I got booked at a festival and they had put me on a BIPOC night and a queer night and then one other show. And I called and said, thank you very much. You get one themed night from me. And then I want to be on the main stage on the other ones. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it. So, and that's another thing too with age. Like I didn't feel like I had to ask for that kind of agency. Yeah. You know, I could stick up for myself, which I wouldn't have done when I was 20. I would have just said thank you and been grateful. But I think what's nice is then that I don't feel when I'm the only queer comic on a lineup, you get a little bit of pressure feeling like, okay, I'm going to be the gay perspective tonight. When it's all queer, then it's not gay comedy, it's just comedy. The Asian shows, I always joke about how much I hate them because I feel like a fraud because I'm adopted. So like people are talking about like really stern parents and like all this like immigration status. And I'm like, Minnesota was white, you know, like I rush to the theater and be like, okay, I get the Shenyang joke. I get the lactose intolerant joke. I get the Jew joke, and then you guys can do whatever else you want. But like, I'm always worried and this is ignorant of me. I'm always worried we're going to have similar material, and we don't because it turns out there's a lot of Asians. I don't know if you know this. It turns out actually we're the majority of the people on the planet. So whenever anyone says you look young for your age, I'm like, actually, mathematically, I look average. You look old. But yeah, so that's so good learning to me too, especially the queer shows as well. It's like you worry, are we all going to tell the same dating jokes and stuff? And no, it turns out there's a multiplicity of points of view in any community. It is just nice sometimes to be just in community. You get your shoulders relaxed a little bit. Yeah.
Do you feel like overall it's been an advantage or a disadvantage for you?
Oh, an advantage. An advantage. Yeah, I think so because I am just a DEI hire. No, I'm just kidding. No, but
that's why I invited you.
Exactly. Thank you. You hadn't had a gay Asian Jew on for like at least a month. Thank you. Breaking barriers, breaking ceilings, all that. That's what I do. I think.
I'm an ally, by the way.
Oh, sure. Yeah, exactly. I know you've famously said that. Gay Asian Jews only. Gadge. That sounds like something else. Anyway, you can edit that out. I think, no, it's clearly been an advantage for me, and I don't mind it. And I used to be annoyed about it in the public speaking life. I remember when I became senior vice president of development, alumni engagement at the new school, that transition in my career, I was starting to get on all the panels. I was like, okay. And I remember complaining about it to our head of equity, inclusion, social justice, this brilliant lawyer, Melanie Hart. I was like, Melanie, am I just Asian in May now and gay in June? I was like, is that what's happening? And she really got my head on straight about all this. And she said, Jonah, what are you proving by saying no? If the places that are asking you to do the talks or whatever are consistent with your values, you get your ass on stage and say, I understand completely why I am up here. And so I think with comedy, when I look at a lineup, I'm the only Asian person. Sure, I bet it helped me. On the other hand, so what? I have a friend, the one girl I ever dated. Haha. I know. It's not that funny. No, I dated for 2 years. Yeah, exactly. She loves to hear it too, especially on podcasts. She's had a huge hit. She's an opera director. She had a huge hit in a show, and the Guardian in London was writing accolades, and she started getting all these offers, and people would call and say, hey, we need a woman director to do such and such. And it just makes you bristle, right, when you hear it. And I said, don't you want to just say like, fuck you, and hang up the phone? And she's like, well, or you can say, do you think I would be further along in my career if I were a white man? And so when I think about why people do or don't give me gigs, I was like, yeah, I probably would maybe have some advantages if I were a white man too. So look at Nate Bargatze's tour coming up. Yeah, and was much talked about in the comedy world. The cruise, the first iteration of headliners. It was all, I think it was, there were no women, not a single woman, and it was something like 40 comics. And people had a lot to say about that because someone like Nate Bargatze obviously has the ability to change someone's career trajectory. So all this to say, sorry, Nate, I can't do the cruise. I'm sure he's listening, and I'm sure I'm never getting booked on it, so I wasn't really worried. Like I said, I don't have cruise material. So all this to say is I don't feel bad about it. And if anyone's pressed about, oh, you got on because you're gay or because you're Asian or something, I'm like, well, I made the audience laugh. So I did my job. Yeah.
I'd love to talk about any, and I don't know if there are any, but the people that inspired you that you loved in comedy growing up or even now. Who to you are like the greats? You see them, and I used the word awe earlier. You're just like, they're so fucking good. I can't believe it.
I think in general, I like mean women in life, and on stage. And so I think number one by far is Joan Rivers for me, because she went after everyone. And that was a different time period, I understand. But she would make fun of Asians as much as she made fun of women, as she made fun. And because of the precision of her writing, she could do it. I think going even further back, you're like, how old are you? Jack Benny, talk about efficiency. He could break a room open laughing with one like raised eyebrow. I actually had a teacher once who had me play around with that kind of persona, sort of like a fancy, Jack wasn't gay, but he had very fancy sort of sensibility, which I can do too. And they're like, play around with like moving less, because there's stillness. And that's David Hyde Pierce talks about that a lot of times. He's in Pirates of Penzance right now on Broadway, and he's the modern major general. And a lot of his best comedic moments are stillness. And so Jack Benny was really great at that. Current day, the era that we live in, I love Ali Wong. Again, because of not just because she's Asian and she's mean sometimes, the precision of her writing, the jokes, the level of care, the amount of work it probably had to take to get a joke like, ladies, I don't want to lean in, I want to lie down. Is so to get all the fluff around. I would love to know how many versions of that she had to get it that perfect. Anthony Jeselnik, love it because it's funny because you don't really know much about him just based on his stand-up, because it's jokes. And the jokes, yes, they all have misdirection, or most have misdirection, and there's a certain rhythm to it that some people have found repetitive. But I'm like, yeah, but you're never gonna find a level of craft like that, you know, because it's not just telling funny stories. He has spent tons of time with a joke, you know.
We've talked a little bit about this, but the qualities that make for a terrific stand-up. I mean, we talked about talent, something you have to have, like a natural ability to
you have to be funny.
It
turns out you have to be funny.
You gotta be funny. How do you think about that? How do you think your favorite comedians or the people you see that you're really impressed by, what do they have? What's the it they have? What do they do habits-wise in your mind that make them so good at this?
Point of view, fearless, but particularly Joan, right? Nothing was off limits. And I think, you know, again, some of that has changed. I think some topics are just not funny. And I see a lot of comics, especially newbies like me, attempt to take on things just to be edgy, like suicide, school shootings, abortion. And I've heard jokes about those things that I thought were funny, but they were in the hands of a real craftsman. It doesn't seem advisable to do that until you've been on stage a little bit longer. But a point of view, I don't I appreciate the craftsmanship of certain very famous comics who shall remain nameless, but I just don't, grumpy dad persona or incredulousness of airports to me is not something that's particularly interesting to me. I'd rather hear someone get up and talk about something just a little bit more personal, less broad.
You work in education, or you've worked in education for so much of your career. And as a longtime comedy fan, I used to go much more to academic lectures and events like that. And now I go to comedy shows. And I wonder if you have thought, or how you think about the role of the comedian in culture, in society, as an entertainer, but also as an educator, if at all.
I think humor is such an underutilized
completely
weapon of choice. I don't know if you go to my website, jonahnigh.com, cut to commercial for Audible. No, you don't have Audible money yet. I'm looking at this setup. This is not Audible money. No, just kidding. It's lovely. But if you look at this, the illustration, I don't know if you ever watched Teen Titans by Marvel. It's a comic book, and Romeo Changal did the illustration for my website, and he did the illustration of that comic. And he was the one who came up with the idea of me using the microphones as nunchucks. So yes, cheeky Asian weapon, but also the idea of the spoken word as a weapon, that it can skewer falsehoods, that it can cut through and get messages across, was sort of the thinking behind that. And I think in publics, I mean, if you look at the TED Talks and things that just non-comedic talks, or things that are billed as non-comedic, the ones that do the best do tend to have a level of levity to it. I think because it's like the Trojan horse to get stuff talked about that should be talked about, especially now, since you may have heard DEI is illegal. I should say illegal DEI is illegal. Yeah, the other kind is not. Still haven't figured out exactly what the difference is, but yeah.
We talked a little bit about your future, and I'd love to come back to that, about how you think about success in this world for yourself. I ask every guest about this, about, it sounds like you've got a great life in New York on balance, but as it pertains to your comedy, how in the future, as you look into the next year or two or three, what would a successful few years look like? And maybe it's already been obtained, but how do you think about that word for yourself?
Obviously. I've obviously done all I can do in comedy.
Mic drop.
Yeah, exactly. I've achieved what I set out to do 16 months ago. Well, if you look at my cash flow projection, I would be thrilled if, like I said, I could have chapter 3 piece, if comedy could be a piece of it. If comedy could be a part of the pie that includes producing, that includes writing, that includes, again, commercials, just to make a living until I retire early. So every time we meet with our retirement people, I'm like, how soon? They had this one financial model that's like having me and my husband live to and I get it. They have to be conservative. That's their job. But to 95, I was like, what if I lived a hard 80? How much money would I need then? What if I just blew it? 65? What are we looking at? So I think that the idea of doing fundraising less and less and less over time and doing just show business, whatever that is. Again, I found a lot of satisfaction working on the movie in the little way that I did. Yeah. And it's called 109 Billion Followers. And Ila Tier is a great writer and director, and J.K. Simmons is amazing. So that is that more. I don't need to be in front of the camera. I don't think I'm a stage animal or anything like that. I'm not one of those people who's I just need to perform. Yeah. It's I don't know. I'm kind of tired. Am I 9? I'll be the first to raise it. I was I'll do the 5 o'clock set. The one that no one wants. I'm I'll do the 7 o'clock. 9 o'clock. I don't know. But yeah. So I think that would be the goal.
Last question I'd love to ask is about advice you would give to a young comic who is, or just a beginner comic who wants to make it in the city in some capacity. What have you learned? And I know it's only been 18 months, but what advice would you have, whether that's hiring teachers or working with teachers, to really take the craftsmanship seriously, or just working your ass off? I don't know what comes to mind, but I'd love to close with any advice you would give a friend or a young comic that you might meet about how to do this.
Yeah, some people have real stigma against classes. They're like, you can't teach being funny. And it's like, again, I do believe you are naturally funny or you're not. But I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks to any creative practice is finding the time to do the grunt work. And so even if you think like a class is a silly idea, which it's not, but even if you do, a class is a forcing mechanism so that every Tuesday from 7 to 10 p.m., you will be in a room of other people doing the same thing, and it will force you to write and test and then eventually do showcase, and then you have a tape. So that would be my first thing. Get in, especially if you're new to New York or even new-ish. It gets you into the DNA of the comedy world here because it's so massive. And I'm lucky enough now to have made some real comedy friends, but I was worried at first that because I met some also not so nice comics at first, people giving me advice that I didn't need or ask for. And again, at age 45, I had the armor to be like, oh, when you have an HBO special, I'll take your class. But for now, I'm going to listen to the teacher. But again, I think in my 20s, I would have been more susceptible to nervousness or just doing what everyone tells me. So get into class to get the work done, to get your 5, to get your 10, and to get that tape, because you can't pitch at people unless you have something you feel really good about. And then just throw that tape at anyone.
130, what was it?
Oh, now I'm up. I'm way into like the 300s now. And of course I keep track because I want to keep track of my hit rate. But for festivals, I'm at a hit rate of about 45%.
Wow.
It's not bad. Yeah. And that's also when I knew, like, okay, it's another way for me to test. I'm like, this material, the market is telling me something, that this material has an audience, you know. So Amazon, when you're listening. And it's Amazon Prime. Or Netflix. We could do several takes. Netflix, Amazon Prime, Tubi, Roku, Oxygen. No, this is really funny. I did a show once, and you give your credits such as they are before you go up. And they announced that I had been on Bravo, which I have not. And I remember being like, I could see why you thought. It feels a little homophobic. But I was like, I have not been on Bravo, folks. I would be happy to, but no, I have not been on Bravo.
Jonah, this is so great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.